Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all for being here today. Mr. Schoenleben, it seems to me that one of the core American values is the rule of law. Would you agree with that? How about you, Mr. Fabricatore?
Yes, absolutely, sir.
Mr. Bautista, that rule of law, core, right?
Yes. Yes.
Mr. Rosenberg, you'd agree with that as well.
As we hear, no one is above the law.
Mr. Fabricatore, am I saying that right, Fabricatore?
Fabricatore, yes, sir.
Fabricatore. Here's my question for you, and that is, how many people who enter between the ports of entry without legal documents have violated U.S. law?
They violate the law the minute that they enter the country by crossing around the ports of entry.
Everyone?
Yes.
Everyone?
Every single one.
Every one of those 2 million gotaways that Mr. Rosenberg told us about. Is that consistent with the rule of law?
No, sir, it is not.
So here's another question, and Mr. Rosenberg touched on it, and you touched on it a little bit, so it's really critical here. People who are in this country illegally, who commit an additional crime against a citizen or someone who is here legally, if they were not in this country illegally, would they have been able to commit that crime?
No, they would not have been.
So a crime prevention strategy would be to enforce the law and secure the border, would it not?
Yes, sir, it would be.
Do you know whether Secretary Mayorkas has told members of ICE and limited their authority on executing removal orders on the more than 1.4 million people who already have a removal order in this country?
Yes, through his priorities, he has limited that.
Tell me how so.
Well, the priorities state that we're not to go after just final orders that don't have recent criminal backgrounds or criminal backgrounds at all. So you're just allowing that to keep growing and growing.
So we passed H.R. 2 out of this body. It languishes in the Senate. Doesn't fix every problem with border security, but it makes a start. We have a Secretary of Homeland Security that has told ICE to stand down. We have a Secretary of Homeland Security who is engaged in a catch and release program. You know what he has said is his priorities? Any one of you know what he said one of his priorities is? He has said it's to make illegal immigration more humane, to expedite those who enter our country illegally. Does that sound like the rule of law to you, Mr. Rosenberg?
Not at all.
How about you, Mr. Bautista? Does that sound like the rule of law?
Not in following the letter of the law, no.
Mr. Schoenleben?
No, sir.
Mr. Fabricatore?
Absolutely not, sir.
So we're left when the chief law enforcement officer, the head of the DHS in this country, says, stand down, don't enforce the law. I have trouble accepting the notion that those who come into this country illegally, they enter this country illegally, regardless of motivation, understand and accept our adherence to the rule of law. And I'll tell you what, if you have people who don't understand the rule of law and its importance, you cannot have freedom, because it facilitates what every one of you know. The bully bad guys will be able to go free, they'll be undeterred, and they will go after and cause havoc and mayhem. I'm not saying everybody who comes to this country illegally is going to commit an additional crime, but they are born under a crime entering this country illegally. And I want to mention real quick, Marianne Mendoza, whose son Brandon Mendoza, police officer, killed by, and I know Mr. Bautista knows the Phoenix area, on a valley freeway. This individual illegally entered the country, drunk, driving for literally miles and miles, runs into Mr. Mendoza, or Mr. Runnebeck, Steve Runnebeck's son Grant, who was killed by an illegal alien who put a gun to his head because he didn't provide him change fast enough at the convenience store. No, they don't share our core values.
Gentleman yields back. Ms. Jayapal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to start by getting some of the facts out there. There is no data to suggest that localities with community trust policies have more criminal activities than others. In fact, hundreds of local law enforcement agencies throughout the United States have adopted community trust policies. And across the country, these local police departments, the ones that my Republican colleagues are so quick to claim that they support, report that trust policies actually reduce crime. Recent comprehensive studies have supported those claims statistically, showing that community trust jurisdictions are demonstrably safer than their counterparts. Mr. Chairman, I ask unanimous consent to submit a sampling of those different studies for the record.
Without objection.
We know that victims and witnesses are much more likely to report crime and cooperate with investigations and prosecutions when they believe that there is little or no risk of deportation if they reach out. Moreover, we know that abusers will use an individual's immigrant status to intimidate them into staying silent. Local law enforcement relies heavily on these victims and witnesses to prevent and punish criminal activity. So, Chief Batista, let me turn to you. I don't want my colleagues to take my word for it. Can you help us understand why jurisdictions with community trust policies in place experience less crime and why their residents feel safer?
Yes, ma'am. Chairman McClintock, Ranking Member Jayapal, what I've seen in my history is that time and again in our communities, when we embrace immigrants and make them feel and be a part of our normal life, that they behave in those same manners, in that they cooperate with law enforcement, and that they no longer are victims that live in the shadows. One of the greatest concerns I have in that situation is that a victim that does not come forward just makes a perfect victim. And I don't think anyone in this room, and certainly no one in law enforcement, ever supports that occurring to anyone in our country.
One of the studies that I submitted into the record found that jurisdictions that adopted sanctuary policies experienced a 52 to 62% reduction in the domestic homicide rate for Hispanic women. Chief Batista, does that statistic track with your experience as a law enforcement officer in jurisdictions that have those kinds of policies?
Yes, it does.
Domestic violence accounts for approximately 15% of all violent crimes, but it often goes unreported. How do community trust policies help domestic violence victims feel more comfortable coming forward?
In the same way, ma'am, in that when we respond on a call for assistance from a victim of domestic violence, we want them to know that their status in the United States is not our primary concern. Our concern at that point is their safety and their welfare. And that has been our guiding principle since I was in Arizona and certainly in California, and I've seen that it works.
I really appreciate that. Chief Batista, you've worked in law enforcement for nearly 4 decades, both in Arizona, most recently in California. Have you seen a difference in how welcoming those states are towards immigrants?
Yes.
And can you compare your engagement with communities of color in Santa Monica and in Mesa?
I'll tell you that as a whole in Arizona, it was much more challenging in that the state's immigration laws made it difficult for local law enforcement to build a relationship in those circumstances. And I'd attended many meetings with immigrant communities, and it felt as though in those meetings, folks were just trying to get by, trying to survive. The difference that I've experienced in Santa Monica in Los Angeles is that their immigrant communities are forthright and willing to come out and engage and be a part of the social fabric of neighborhoods. And their kids and the encouragement that they receive is not just to be able to get through high school, but to be thinking about what college, what university they're going to go to and what profession are they going to pursue. And it just feels as though folks are more welcoming and understanding and wanting to achieve the American dream just like everyone else.
Just like everyone else. Can you discuss how passing immigration reform, which brings undocumented individuals out of the shadows and regularizes their immigration status, would actually improve the job you're trying to do around local policing and national security?
Community policing is foundational precept, is trust. I mentioned it earlier. And so having them come out of the shadows, like I said, normalizes their behaviors in our neighborhoods, in our cities. It makes it so that that communication, that ability to understand what's going on at the neighborhood level is improved. And I can't say enough about how it will improve our ability to mitigate threats at even the national level.
Thank you, Chief Batista, for getting those facts out there. I think it's clear our words matter, and it's important that we discuss these issues carefully. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
love the chase and the hunt, and I set the pace when I'm running. I always take what I want and I always give it 100. Don't need a bank, no I'm funded. Play the game like it's nothing. I'm always thankful for something. Don't take for granted, stay humble. Now wake up! It's time to look at the enemy. Look in the mirror if he is no friend to me. It's not working out, maybe it's the chemistry. It's time to break up so I can make a better me. Better believe in your mind, cause it's everything. You can mold, shape, find almost anything. All it takes is some time and some clarity to find your identity. It's mind over everything. I'm immortal. When I feel like this, I'm immortal. When I feel like this, I'm immortal. When I feel like this, I'm immortal. Don't be scared. Just give me up. Don't be scared. Back. I won't stop, I'ma fight until there's nothing left. It's so on, you're gonna be hurting bad, cause I've been to hell and back. You don't wanna make me mad, I stay strong, you will never see me crack. And if you get in my way, you're gonna feel the wrath. Gotta say it to my face while he's looking back. Mirror breaks after math, when I hate I attack.